Good morning, councillors, staff and members in the cyber gallery. Due to COVID-19 restrictions regarding gatherings and the need to comply with social distancing measures, all council meetings will be held by video conference until further notice. Residents will not be able to attend meetings in person. Federation Council wishes to advise members of the public gallery that meetings will be live streamed so that the public may view the proceedings of the meeting in real time or later, and will be available after each meeting on the council's website. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today, the Bangarang people, and acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who now reside in this area. I extend that respect to elders past and present of the Bangarang nations. Number 3, apologies and applications for leave of absence by councillors.
Got an apology there, Mr. Chair, from Councillor Law. Recommendation to accept that apology.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Longmire, seconded by Councillor Whitechurch. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. 3.2, application for leave of absence. If leave is granted, the Deputy Mayor will take the place where possible of other councillors may assist if available in this period.
So there's two recommendations there. The one being Councillor Law be granted a leave of absence for all meetings for the period 14th, 15th of September inclusive due to work commitments. And number 2 is that the Mayor be granted leave of absence for all meetings for the period 18th of September to the 1st of October 2020 inclusive for holidays.
Thank you. Would someone like to move that, please? Moved by Councillor Whitechurch, seconded by Councillor Wales. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. 5, disclosures of interest.
Minutes, sorry.
Sorry. 4.1, confirmation of minutes for the ordinary meeting held on the 18th of August 2020. Would someone like to move that, please?
So moved.
Moved. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Thomas and seconded by Councillor Longley. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Disclosure of interest.
Haven't received any.
There be none. We'll move on to 6, Merrill Minute. 6.1, COVID-19 update, public health order improves border access. There's a recommendation there. Item number 1, that 1.1 of the recommendation, the council send a letter of thanks to the New South Wales Premier, Deputy Premier, the member for Albury, Mr. Justin Clancy, and Cross-Border Commissioner James McTavish to thank them for the improvements made to the border closures. And point 2, that council in a letter highlight the urgent and continued need to review and improve the situation, and in particular to improve promotion of travelling from other parts of New South Wales, not in Sydney COVID hotspots, into the border region to visit. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Wales, seconded by Councillor Longley. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now we move to item number 7, the General Manager's report.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The first report, 7.1, is the election of Deputy Mayor for the next 12 months. So 1-year term. The recommendation there is that the method of election for the office of Deputy Mayor be by way of open voting, that the term be determined as 1 year, and that Council now conduct the Deputy Mayor elections.
Thank you. Can I have a mover for that recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Thomas, seconded by Councillor Whitechurch. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
So, as a returning officer, I have in front of me one nomination for Deputy Mayor, being Councillor Whitechurch, and that's been presented in the correct form, with seconded. So, was there any other nominations coming forward for consideration of Deputy Mayor? So, that being the case, Councillor Whitechurch, are you willing to accept that nomination and
Yes,
the role of Deputy Mayor? So we might just have a recommendation there, Rochelle, that we've moved that one. So we might just have another recommendation announcing that Councillor Whitechurch be elected as Deputy Mayor. Get a mover and a seconder.
So moved by Councillor Longley, seconded by Councillor Thomas. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.
Okay, second point.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Important election, that.
Yeah, very.
Thanks, councillors. 7.2, council delegates to reference advisory groups, organisations and committees. So it's quite a lengthy table there, which has been put together to reflect the representation by councillors on a wide range of committees, whether they be 355 committees, advisory committees, other committees required by legislation and other just external organisations where we seek representation to lobby on behalf of our community. So there is been some work done since council has had a brief look at this in the workshop to see if we can best allocate or reflect what the current situation is, but certainly any other changes welcome at this stage. If not, we've got a recommendation there to reaffirm those delegates and to further review those after the 2021 council elections.
Thank you. Can I move, please? Moved by councillor Thomas, seconded by councillor Wales. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll put it all in favour. Against, carried.
7.3 is a reflection of the Local Government New South Wales Annual Conference now being transferred to a virtual conference, which is occurring on the 23rd of November, and to consider some motions. I did hope to finalise the wording of the motions, being a short lead into this council meeting, wasn't able to. So seeking that council would note the report on the 2020 Local Government Annual Conference virtual, being a virtual conference, to consider any other additional councillors who may want to attend some or all of that conference during that day. It'll be we'll be doing it here at council via our screens, and the council would delegate to the mayor and GM the authority to finalise and submit motions for consideration, including I'll refer the draft motions to councillors prior to lodgement. But I've listed out some of the key areas I think are still where council should be putting forward motions for consideration, and often if they're quite common from other councils, what the LG New South will do, they'll group them together into a joint motion. So some of these ones around COVID and things may do that, I imagine. But there's also some other ones around the road classification review, joint organisation funding and a number of areas. So.
Thank you. We have a mover, moved by councillor Thomas and seconded by councillor Longmire. Councillor Thomas, would you have a question?
Directed to our General Manager. If possible, would I be able to come into the room? I'd like to be an added delegate now that it's become virtual.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Longmire.
If I may, Mr Mayor, ask of the question of the General Manager in regard to regional roads classification review, and it mentions about that the council's not worse off financially and or socially. How do we make a judgment? I guess, what's the call on that, Mr Butler?
Yeah, that's sort of comes off the back, I suppose, the history of this project comes off the pre-election commitments or promises made by the current government about transferring all these roads across. We don't think it was done with a great amount of thought into those impacts and how that was to occur. So, but they followed through with their project in terms of setting up a panel, which Steve, our director, is quite involved with, as well as Ramjo. But the biggest issue all along is about so by social, I mean employment aspects and economic things, about whether they would guarantee work back to our crews or not, or whether you'd have to be fully fledged contractor under Transport for New South Wales. So there's really, I think it's Steve knows a lot more about it, but I think it's like a 3 or 4 year program where they're aiming to take a fair amount each year if councils are willing. So what we'll be doing now is getting the thoughts of council, making a submission by the end of the year, which I think there's a further report in this council meeting where Steve would probably put a bit more detail, if you like.
I'd like that, yeah, if I may, under the circumstances, I accept that. Thank you for that.
Thank you, councillor Longmire. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Wallace.
Mr Mayor, I've been to these before the conference. It's possible I could be in attendance at this one.
Included?
Yes.
Yeah. The registrations have come quite down because it's only an online thing, so we
that's
have an issue with.
Quite interesting. I like going to the.
We'll get Rochelle to register. So we've got councillor Wales and Thomas as additional. Yep.
Excellent. Any further questions or comments? If not, I'll put it all in favour.
Okay.
Against, carried.
7.4 is the Kyra swimming pool construction update and the naming of the renewed facility. So the report is there before council. They have had previous reports on formalising the name of the facility, the overall name. So there's a background there about the consultation that has occurred through the Swimming Pool Advisory Committee, That committee is formally recommending it be named the Cora Aquatic Centre, and that being the name that went out in the design plans on the facade of the front of the building. It seemed to get quite strong support, and they did consider a number of other formats or versions of those sort of words. So the recommendation before council is to endorse the Cora Swimming Pool Advisory Committee's recommendation being naming the new facility the Cora Aquatic Centre. To work with so point 2 would be to work with the Cora Swimming Pool Advisory Committee to design an honour board and receive further reports as that progresses, and not wanting to delay that process towards opening the new facilities. That can just run along as it does, and that council at a later stage would consider if the individual pools be named, including if that was the case, and named or presented, consulting with those family members and the advisory committee going forward. But the key to get this one over the line obviously is signage, and a lot of our other work involves around that with our branding and getting the facility recognised on things like Google Maps and as a location itself. So.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Longley, seconded by Councillor Whitechurch. Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Whitechurch.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, coming off the back of the Pool Consulting Committee, which obviously myself as Chair, Councillor Longley and Councillor Law were part of, along with the whole community. And when I say the whole community, there was youth council, there was senior citizens, there was business people, swimming club, councillors. So I've got a good mix of townspeople. I think there was up to 16 on that committee. And it was very heavily discussed around the naming, the options that were put up. Yes, as our General Manager said, the Cora Aquatic Centre was something that was always used as a term for the pool right through the tender and design process. But when it came down to speaking about the name, it really was quite resounding that the Cora Aquatic Centre would be the name that was chosen. We did discuss the honour board, and the reason the honour board had come up was largely from the swimming club. They thought that there was a lot of other people that have succeeded in the swimming club and from the town and district that would be well worthy of recognition because of obviously their swimming achievements, but also their involvement around the pool. The two names of the families that were brought up by Councillor Law to the committee were certainly hugely acknowledged, and nobody could take that away. But the swimming club had thought, and when that presentation was put to the committee, that naming the pools at this point, we probably should, if we're going to do that, look further down the path to the whole community. They certainly were insistent as a committee that an honour board be erected at the opening of the pool, with the swimming club and the community be involved as to who goes on that honour board, because it's not just the people that are involved outside the pool. There's probably some people that were worthy of being acknowledged the last 60 years from within the pool. So that was where that came. But I'm certainly happy to support the recommendation, the naming, and as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Whitechurch. And just a brief comment. It's great to move along with this. I went in there the other day. It just blew me away, the look of the pool. It's state of the art, a really amazing project, and you can actually visualise it now. So it's great to push on and not let anything hold us up with that. So if there'd be no further comments, I'll put it all in favour. Against, carried. Thank you, Mr. General Manager. We'll now call item number 8, Director of Corporate and Community Services report.
Just get Joe to come in. Yep. We should probably set up, stand up there or there, either way. Close to the camera or away from it?
Away from the camera. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors.
Morning.
So the first report here is the financial performance report for the month ending 31st of August 2020. So obviously only 2 months into the new financial year. Generally, the operating program is as budgeted, noting we are only 2 months into the year. There are some adjustments we'll be putting through with the quarterly budget review in relation to interest. So the budget we've got for interest is on the high side, given low interest rates and the New South Wales government putting in a maximum interest rate of 0% on outstanding rates and charges. At the same time, our interest expense has been constructed on a higher interest rate than we're actually having to pay. So they should net off. So, but generally things are on track there. We have $26.2 million in cash and investments. 6.6 million of this relates to the general fund, and 22.2 million is held in term deposits in accordance with Council's investment policy. With the levying of 2021 rates and charges. The total debt is currently at $14.3 million, so that's where we would expect it to be at the end of August. So the report there is for noting.
Thank you. Can I have a move for that report, please? Moved by Councillor Longley, seconded by Councillor Thomas. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll put it. All in favour? Against? Carried. Okay.
The next report is the minutes of two recent Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meetings, so from the 29th of May 2020 and the 21st of August. So those minutes there are for noting and for both meetings, and the recommendation is that they be noted and be included on Council's website.
Thank you. Can I have a move by Councillor Wales and seconded by Councillor Whitechurch? Any questions or comments? If not, I'll put it. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
8.33 relates to a government inquiry, a state government inquiry that was launched in July 2020 into New South Wales government grant programs. So they set up the committee and an inquiry to better understand where improvements could be made to New South Wales government grant programs. A submission was made on behalf of council and is included in the papers for noting.
Excellent. Thank you. Can I have a move for that recommendation, please, Councillor? Moved by Councillor Thomas, seconded by Councillor Whitechurch. Any questions or comments? All in favour? Against? Carried.
Agenda item 8.4 relates to an arts and cultural strategy for Federation Council. So we are recommending a strategy be adopted for the period through to 2025. We're recommending it be adopted in principle and released on public exhibition. As you would be aware, arts and culture plays an important role in the health and wellbeing of our communities, and probably particularly, a high priority for us at the moment, given the COVID-19 situation and the current economic climate. In addition, it does support our tourism and economic development, so arts and culture can play a key role in that recovery. There has been a range of community engagement undertaken to date to get the strategy to this point, and it's now proposed to release it for broader public exhibition and bring back a final strategy at a future council meeting.
Excellent. A move by Councillor Thomas, seconded by Councillor Longley. Questions or comments? Councillor Thomas.
It's really interesting with this arts and cultural strategy. I think it's a really exciting prospect to bring to council. The other point of call that the 5 themes are going to be foundational for this journey, and I do look forward to seeing this journey progress. I don't know whether it's out of COVID-19 and people thinking about things, but I've been contacted by 2 separate community members, and one of the community members is from Yarrawonga, and they are really considering, again, the Silo Art project. They've tried on that side of the river, but they've approached Federation Council and asked us to be involved. They really want to form another committee, but I'm not really sure about reinventing the wheel, and I've suggested that somehow they could link in possibly with this committee that we have developed and had the expression of interest to go out. The other point of call too is, if you didn't mind, could I actually forward the copy of the draft onto the businessman who has approached me from Yarrawonga? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Once council's adopted it in principle,
Yeah.
it will be released
Yeah,
for public exhibition. So that's
Yeah.
definitely, we would appreciate you forwarding it to people that you think would be interested.
So I'm just saying there might be a bit of cross-borders going on, but that's fine. Murray Arts do have some funds available at the moment, as you would be aware, but obviously that's going to happen in New South Wales. I'll explain that to them. So that's that concept. And the other point of call is that across the arts, which is once again, cross-border art strategy, art group in Mulwala, Yarrawonga, they have their AGM, and I would like to think that maybe I could get this as a discussion point on their AGM, if that was okay, because it's coming up at the end of the month.
That sounds good. Thanks, Councillor Thomas.
No worries.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put it. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Agenda item 8.5 relates to the unreasonable complainant conduct policy. So this is a new policy for our council, and you will recall that it was adopted in principle in June 2020 and released on public exhibition. It's important to note the draft that was prepared was based on the New South Wales Ombudsman model policy, and that was a comprehensive consolidated policy and procedural document. The draft policy we had prepared contained the policy elements, and then there was an internal procedural document that aligned with the with the Ombudsman's version, but there was going to be an internal document. We have released it on public exhibition and received 2 submissions. In light of those 2 submissions and in the interest of transparency and accountability, the draft policy has now been amended to include the policy and the procedural elements so that it clearly aligns with the Ombudsman's model policy, and that is now recommended to you for adoption.
Thank you very much. Moved by councillor Thomas and seconded by councillor Longmire. Any questions or comments, councillors? Not, I'll put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried.
Agenda item 8.6, the Lonsdale Recreation Reserve Committee Terms of Reference. So this has been a long-standing project, and the Lonsdale Recreation Reserve Committee has been very proactive in supporting the development of this terms of reference for that committee. I'd particularly like to thank Bethany Robinson, who's the secretary of that committee. She's made a significant contribution and has really assisted us to develop this into being a robust guidance tool for the committee, which will then have benefits for our other committees across the council area. At the same time, I'd also like to acknowledge the contribution made by a couple of council officers to this, particularly Heidi Newmeister, our governance officer, and Darren Harvey, our manager recreation. They've been instrumental in getting it to this point. So the recommendation before you is to adopt the Lonsdale Recreation Reserve Committee Terms of Reference and to review that on a 2-yearly basis from this point forward.
Thank you. Moved by councillor Thomas and seconded by councillor Whitchurch. Any questions, councillor Thomas?
Right. I don't know that Councillor Kennedy can hear me or not, but he would very much remember our first council meeting in the October 3 years ago. What was on our business papers? It was removal of Bay 13. We actually had that overturned, didn't we, Councillor Kennedy? And now look at it. It's a beautiful building and it's been utilised by our community, and I think it will only move forward and be utilised more by our community. The interest there, the public interest to use that facility is growing, which is great. So we started this journey with Lonsdale Recreation Reserve. The relationship they had with Federation Council, let's be honest, it wasn't good. There was really virtually no relationship, and it wasn't really actually. But how pleasing we can sit here today and see how far they've come. Their journey has just been fabulous, and I would like to think it will only continue, and it is thanks to those key people that Director Shannon has just mentioned. And even the stakeholders, like the stakeholders for that reserve, have come together and they are now all on the one page, thanks to those key people. So moving forward, I'm only too happy to endorse this terms of reference, and as Director Shannon said, it will become a foundation possibly for our other Section 355 committees. So thank you to all involved.
Yeah, and I just added to that, councillor Thomas, you're right, it was a long but very successful time. It was amazing. I was only down there a couple of weeks ago, and to see the transformation, both buildings and committee, people's attitudes, it was absolutely fantastic. So congratulations to the staff involved and that local champion down there as well. Sorry, I forgot Bethany.
Bethany.
Very good. Councillor Wales.
Yeah, I'd just like to support what Joe said and Robin about the staff team. The key people, they are good, and Bethany Robin is so dedicated to the Lonsdale Reserve. It's good to see they're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, I'll put it all in favour. Against, carried.
Agenda item 8.7 relates to delegations to the General Manager. It presents a proposal to provide an additional delegation to the General Manager to manage COVID-19 related staffing matters. So the recommendation before you is that Council grant the General Manager authority to exercise his discretion in dealing with staffing matters related to COVID-19, including in the granting of any leave, with such delegation to sit on top of the existing delegation and to expire on the 30th of June 2021.
Thank you. Moved by councillor Longmire, seconded by councillor Thomas. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried. And thank you very much, Director Shannon.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, councillors.
Okay, we'll now move on to item number 9, Director of Development and Environmental Services report.
Hello everyone.
Good morning.
How are we all?
Good.
G'day, Susan.
Good. Susan?
All right, item 9.1 is one of your regular reports, which is the development and construction certificates. Approved under delegation since the last council meeting. As you can see, we've been a little bit busy.
Would someone like to move that recommendation? Please, moved by councillor Longway, seconded by councillor Longley. Questions or comments, councillors? If not, I shall put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 2 is the development applications approved under delegation, and happy to take any questions or comments. Again, we've been very busy.
Excellent. Can I have someone to move that recommendation, please? Moved by councillor Thomas, seconded by councillor Wales.
Councillor
I know,
Kennedy.
I'm just saying, I can hear fellow councillors only just.
Can the councillors talk, just to test the sound? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Councillor Meagle, yes, I'm getting a little frustrated because it seems to be completely separate. I don't know if you can hear me now.
I can now.
Perfect.
Yeah, but not before.
Oh,
Yes, yeah, that's
Yeah,
now.
now, I actually just sent an email to Michael while we're talking to say that the screen wasn't on. Yeah, that's just come up now.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent,
Maybe we
excellent.
need to apologise to our fellow councillors who couldn't see you.
Apologies, those councillors on the screen.
You weren't being thought of.
it's been a nice council meeting to watch.
Okay, did I get a mover and a seconder?
Yes, you had mover was Wales, seconder was Thomas.
Councillor Wales and councillor Thomas. Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Meagle or Kendi, would you like to make a comment or a question?
Game a bit.
Yeah, bring them in.
No, you've had your chance. I'm not going to say anything more now.
Okay, if there's nothing further, I'll put it all in favour.
You got that?
Yeah.
Against, carried. Thank you.
Item 9.3 is the current state and regionally significant applications. There's no change for this month. However, I'd like to alert councillors we've got one that's going on exhibition tomorrow, which is a stage 1 and concept plan for a subdivision in Mulwala.
Thank you. Can I have a mover for that recommendation, please? That moved by councillor Meagle and seconded by councillor Kennedy. Any questions or comments here, councillors? Councillor Longley.
Comment in Howling the other day that the Federation Council is opposing the sand and gravel expansion. Is that a correct statement?
No, that's not a correct statement. We've sought
I didn't think
additional
it was, but yeah.
sought additional information because we didn't have enough information to assess the impacts for our community in particular and our assets.
Excellent. Anything further, councillors? If not, I'll put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried.
Councillors, item 9.4 is regarding the management of the caravan park and master plan update. The master plan, as you're aware, has been out on exhibition, and we're working with the consultants to complete that and hope to have that back to council in October. As you would be aware, our manager has retired, and we've put in an interim temporary structure, but we need to make some decisions as that structure finishes up at the 30th of September. So we either need to continue that or look at another option. So before you in the report are several options, and the recommendation is to go for a short-term lease to operate the park, and that we go out for requests for tender. And the General Manager might want to speak on this particular topic.
Okay, well, I'll get a move for that one, councillors. Moved by councillor Meagle, seconded by councillor Kennedy. Once again, they're back in the game. Any questions or comments, councillors?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Just to correct the terminology just there, it actually won't be a lease, it'll be a contract just to manage the park. It just gives us that further time whilst we expect the report coming through October with the wrapping up of all the submissions in relation to Ball Park Master Plan. There's not a lot of submissions where we'd see any changes, but the councillors have had a brief look at that, and we've got our consultants integrated site design now working through what those submissions really mean in terms of the current layout and what it could look like. So there'll be some work going on over the next few weeks, and I'd be encouraging some councillors to be available so we can forward some information around, bring that back. But yeah, this just gets us through with the retirement of the current manager, and the structure was only going to go for another, less than 8 to 9 months now until next June. It doesn't give us the time to be continuing to plan and develop this park. So we figure and going out with this model gives us that bit of time now to get get a contract underway, and it'll also operate it, we think, more efficiently because we won't be bound by the local government award. So we're going through our consultants. They've got some pretty recent contracts where the industry are using on many other parks. So we'll be working away with them for the next few weeks and get that out and hopefully get some good interest.
Any further questions or comments here, councillors? Councillor Whitechurch.
Mr Mayor, I endorse the recommendation, and I think that, as our directors insinuated, we can't continue with the staff doing what they're doing over and above down at the park now, and we've had probably, as our directors insinuated on previous meetings, we've had probably the most turbulent, roughest thing to have to experience with COVID, bushfires, the gutting of the park, everything since it happened. So I think that the recommendation we've got there, if that's the shortest possible way that we can get new management in there, then I'm happy with that. But if it's not the shortest possible way, I'd be thinking we look at the shortest and quickest possible way. No doubt the staff have looked into that to happen. But I'd like to congratulate all the staff on what they've done, including the prior management staff and the current staff down the park, plus our internal staff, and look to get this in place as soon as we can, because as we all know, that with the master plan coming to fruition and then COVID finishing at some point, we're going to be inundated with people. So I support it, and if it's the quickest way, very good.
Thank you, Councillor Whitechurch. Would the General Manager like to make a comment on that, whether that would be the shortest, quickest way, from that comment from Councillor Whitechurch?
Yeah, we consider that is the best way to do it, and it gives contractors some surety then by going out for an open tender. So unfortunately, it does take time, and there never is an easy way or an easy time transition out of a park. Like ideally, you're probably trying to do it in June or July. Even if it is a similar structure, you still want to do it in a quieter time. So we've got to also balance that current structure and staffing versus the introduction of the contractor model. So it's just going to be hopefully, in March we'll have the KVE event again, but that's all subject to COVID. But so we've just got to play it through as we go, get our documents right, get them out, and then understand how that transitions over. But there's no real good time, because you don't want to be changing over right in the middle of peak period either. So, and we're hoping for a really busy summer like everyone is. So.
Thank you. Would there be any further comments there, councillors? If not, I'd before I'd just like to congratulate Director Appleyard, number one, for taking on the job, on the role, when she had an extremely busy portfolio anyway. And it's been a really tough gig, as we all know. But the reports and to follow it up and to get a report on the table to move forward, I think she deserves a congratulations there, councillor. So I think
endorse that too.
So I'll put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried.
All right, item 9.5 is the local strategic planning statement. This was presented to council back in May or June, I think it was. Anyway, since then it went out on exhibition. We received a total of 7 submissions, and the document, as you'll see from your attachments, has been altered greatly. And that is a result mainly of the submission from the Department of Planning. We've worked closely, so Megan and myself have worked closely with the Western Region office to get this to a point where it can be presented back to council and contains what we need to do in the next 5 to 7 years for the council area. As council be aware, we've had problems with the preparation of the new LEP. So again, the department are helping us with that. That was a report to last council meeting. And this will then guide the local strategic planning statement the land use strategy that needs to sit for a full variation to another LEP in the future.
Thank you. Would someone like to move that recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Whitechurch, seconded by Councillor Meagle. Any questions or comments? Councillor Thomas.
Just really want to highlight that those people who do make submissions and take the time to make submissions and, acknowledge that, because that's not a 5-minute job. And I really think that these people who do that, that they can have influence on council documents and decisions. And maybe we need to highlight that more, that, encourage that more. I mean, how often do we have drafts and that kind of thing go out on public exhibition, and we may not get submissions? I don't know how we increase that, and whether that's through our comms team, I'm not really sure, or whether it's self-interest, that's why people do make submissions. But sometimes I feel, and we get no submissions, I think, okay, why did that happen? Considering that I thought it might have been an important draft or strategy or document that went out for that time period. But that's good. Just wanted to acknowledge them. Yeah.
Thank you.
We've found that in the planning department in particular, since we've developed the community participation plan, we are starting to get a lot more submissions,
good.
which is great. Makes our job easier.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put it. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried.
Councillors, item 9.6 is about labour provision, a tender for the labour provision of labour for the hire services for lifeguards and associated services for the Cora and Howlong swimming pools. As you can see from that, it was referring this to closed session of council due to commercial infringement.
Thank you. Okay, would someone like to move that motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by councillor Meagle, seconded by councillor Kennedy. Any questions or comments, councillors? If not, I'll put it. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. And thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Item number 10, Director of Engineering Services Report. Steve?
Got to come from Victoria, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, just travelling over from Victoria.
Yeah.
Across the river.
I'm just guarding the morning tea out there.
Excellent.
Item 10.1, Mr Mayor, is just a standard report on our
Work program. Would someone like to move that recommendation, please, councillors? Moved by councillor Longley, seconded by councillor Kennedy. Any questions or comments there, councillors? Councillor Longmire.
Yeah, if I may, Mr Mayor, in regard to going forward with our network of roads in the rural areas, in the rural sector, we're looking at probably potentially, and that's a dangerous word, but the harvest that's looking at us right across our Federation Council area will be probably one of the biggest ever. And I think it needs to be noted at this time of the year, not because of anything but in preparation, if I say it like that going forward to use the weather that's available, if we can, to prepare our back roads, our rural roads where this harvest will come from, to get delivered, to the network of receiving centres, and also, obviously, there'll be a lot of on-farm storage. And I think, I'm not sure if there's a plan or whichever way to go forward for a preparation of that opportunity, because I think if there's a recovery from what we've seen throughout the country at the moment with the COVID opportunity, one of the leading things to bring us back into recovery, hopefully, will be the agriculture sector. To whichever way you drive, there's enormous harvest looking at us. And so I think it'll be strategically smart and complementary to the efforts of everybody that's going to participate in this enormous harvest, to have a network of opportunities in the roads all fixed up and ready so that they can get on with it.
Yeah, excellent, Councillor Longmire. Any further comments or questions there, councillors? Councillor Watcher.
Mr Mayor, just on Councillor Longmire's comments there about the rural roads, and I think everybody that's in the rural area have the worst road when it's wet, and then it doesn't seem to have got prepared, and you always hear about it. But I am getting some feedback, and probably Councillor Longmire will be able to get a bit more out in the bush, that the roads that are getting done, people are generally happy with, and I think that pushing forward with that and keeping that rolling, Steve's suddenly become the key, as Councillor Longmire said. But even as early as this morning, a guy from Rand was coming to pay his registration, and he made comment about how good the roads are. He said, and even the dirt roads have now got a camber on them for the water to run off, he said. And so people are talking one way or the other, and I think keeping moving forward with the dirt road thing with the harvest, a good thing.
Excellent.
Certainly very mindful of it, and we will continue to push forward in that area.
Councillor Thomas.
I think I am going to bring this up now. It's probably a question without notice, but it is some feedback and kind of probably fits into one of the lines here in regards to our transfer stations and the green waste shredding and the collection of scrap metal. So it's going to be dealing with our transfer station. It's going to be dealing with our rubbish, and it's the feedback that I am getting, and I don't know whether other councils are getting it, in regards to the rate notices and the fees. we
Right.
need to do some community work around that.
In relation to more,
Increase,
of garbage,
yes,
particularly, yeah,
yes,
yeah, waste.
Communication's missing.
yes. I
Yep.
think it's been a shock for our ratepayers to see it and how they've seen it and how it's come across to them.
Yeah,
Just thought I'd bring it up now, Director Carmichael, yeah, how are we going to deal with it?
and just to, we'll just make a comment on that. It's no secret that, I think that the Shire's been generally, carrying the load in relation to waste. The cost is enormous, and that's why, particularly with Steve, we're looking at our own waste facilities to try and bring those, eventually try and bring those waste costs down. To improve that, but we, obviously need to get that out and, get the message around, so
Yeah.
we are
We can
doing our
put
best.
together a strategy probably just to explain to our ratepayers why it had to happen.
Needs to be a comms.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was of the opinion that it had been done.
Yeah, that's what I had some feedback about that.
There's been an extensive comms campaign launched and went through it all, so
I haven't seen it.
But maybe not,
well, it'll be on social media and somewhere, probably up where you and I would look. And I don't mean that disrespectfully.
I really feel that I'm probably feeling like the third wheel when I'm really just passing on local communities' feelings about,
And I had the same contact, so I've had asked, our manager of comms and Steve's manager of operations, Tony, to
Yeah, I knew they'd done a lot of work in that area. so-
yeah.
follow up if needs to be.
I'm wondering if Alana, did you want to make a comment on that? No need to if you,
Haven't seen, oh, she's down there.
No, I'm here, Pat. Happy to make a comment. So we have done an extensive communications plan on that and included content about the increase in many of council's publications. But we have spoken and we are going to work on some further educational pieces just to better explain those changes. And I think that's where the community are getting a little bit confused in respect to the changes that have been made and then the charges that are on their rates notice and water notices as such. So we'll make sure that we can make that really clear and get that underway to further support the work that's being done.
I thought that's possibly the case, but there's probably a more softening comms approach because it's never a popular thing, is it, to put the rates up?
Gate fees.
Yeah.
and just.
Councillor Whitechurch was all over it. He's on the Facebook and what did you say, 86 complaints in Howler?
Yeah, there was a fairly uproar on social media, as Director Carmichael said, with the fees, because I think what had happened was the lead into the new signage going up, correct me if I'm wrong, so the tip fees were basically free until that transition happened for about a week. And then when the sign went up, it was almost double. I think $40 for a green waste 6x4 trailer and $80 for general waste for a 6x4 trailer. At that point, I did notify our staffing that there was a fair bit of activity on social media about it. The reply was going to be that a red bin, which is a quarter of a cubic metre, was going to be $5. So, of course, the push was to put everything through your red bin. Well, people don't necessarily do that, and they're not habitual rubbish throwers, they're more hoarders, but when they do go to the tip, they've got a stocked up pile of rubbish and they get there and it's $80. So the social media putting the comms out, as Alana and our team do, is very good, but nothing is as good as word of mouth and a negative comment. So when they come back from the tip and tell their friend and a friend and a friend that's $80 to go to the tip now, and then put it on social media, it spreads like wildfire. So like Councillor Thomas had said, the general talk around all of our towns is that the jump is huge, obviously double. As councillors, we're aware that we're getting hammered by the EPA on all of our tips, but the general public doesn't know that's why it's happening, and they're of the perception that it's a money grab from council, and why. That's what I'm getting.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
I would just also like to consider or get some feedback on our strategy moving forward about possibly the increase in roadside dumping of rubbish because people are going to be using their local tips.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. You would just hope that council's trying to be responsible for their waste strategy, and bring it back into line and bring it, into the new age, and eventually reduce the cost. You would hopefully that people would understand that and be responsible where they put their rubbish as well. Councillor Longmire.
Mr Mayor, in regard to the anxiety, would it not be something to consider a hard waste collection perhaps once a year or whatever? Is that a thing Mr. General Manager or Mr. Carmichael might think was a good thing about it?
There is one in the northern communities that's been going for a lot of years, and that was a trade-off when they closed, I think, Miranda, Borey Creek and Rand landfills. And that's still trickling along in the budget. I think it's about 16 or 20 grand a year. It's always problematic, even in those small communities. So I don't really think we'd be able to manage it, the risk and the load in these towns of this size, but where they're sort of going toward more Steve-based vouchers and systems like that, give everyone a certain time where they can get free things to the tip. I know it doesn't help elderly and that, but yeah, the old hard waste collections are pretty tough in a town, and you end up with streets full of waste while you're doing it.
Well, exactly.
It's tough though, yeah.
The last thing we want in our tips at the moment is just a trailer load of rubbish. We need to have it segregated, and a lot of the fees that we looked at this year were to try and to make it less expensive if you did go to the trouble of segregating. If you go into, I mean, right, I don't live in Cora, but I go to the Albury tip fairly regularly. Not regularly, but occasionally. There, if you don't segregate there, you virtually don't get in the gate. The old days of turning up with a load of rubbish and just say you got general, they're gone. I just tell you. And to go through, and you go through the facility, you need a Gregory's map to come out the other end, if anybody still knows what a Gregory's map is. But it's a good facility, and I get that way now from stacking my trailer. You stack certain things at the back and you move forward as you get in your trailer, and that's what some of the fees that we put in this year were, to try and get people to start to segregate waste a bit, and hopefully down the track we can recycle a lot of that stuff. So
Maybe that needs to be part of our education program, is exactly what you're saying. Learn to segregate for these reasons, X, Y, Z, and list them.
That's part of the comms stuff that we're looking at. Obviously, we're just not getting across the full community, and social media is a wonderful thing because you can start to pick on some little thing off to the side and it snowballs, and the
And as we've just been elected.
truth behind what you're trying to do sometimes gets completely bypassed.
Yeah. Anyway, that's
It's interesting how it works. The first cost starts at the supermarket shelf, and then finishes by getting rid of that waste product at the tip. So maybe the cost at the supermarket there, but maybe a tax there. Okay.
It's been a real interesting side effect to the border closure, because that means anybody in Victoria hasn't been able to bring stubby cans across.
okay.
And the amount of rubbish that's gone back through the bin systems in Victoria, which incidentally all comes straight across the border and goes into Albury's tip. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Thank you. Councillor Longmire.
Mr. Mayor, if I may ask a question in regard to another point here. Mr. Carmichael, there must be a lot of Sloan's froglet habitat out near Balga, because it says here we've got to avoid those table drain cleaning situations. How do we identify where this frog is? What's the strategy?
We're working on a management plan for that. So the department's working with us on that, and we'll drive. I mean, Sloan's froglet is widespread from Albury right along the Murray down out of this shire. So we're just going to have to learn to live with it. And we're in the process of coming up with a management plan for that, which will have some identified maps of where it is. So there's certain times of the year you won't be allowed to do certain things on roadside control. So it's a bit like any wildlife protection or fauna and flora protection measures. There's not a lot we can do about it, except we've got to work in with it and just plan our activities to make sure that we don't upset the poor little fella.
It's amazing, because I've been around the scene a fair bit, and I haven't heard of him up until lately, and I've just wondered where he came from.
I would have to admit, I don't think I've ever seen one.
I
But
thought Mr. Carmichael, the local councillors could be the chief spotters.
could be if he hasn't seen
I
it.
am the chief spotter.
You're the delegate?
I am the delegate.
See Fred walking along with his hands and knees looking for the frog.
He's not very big, apparently. Does
If you like your thumbnail.
he? He's only about the size of your thumbnail.
Make a big noise, don't
But he's loud.
Wasn't back to
Loud.
All right, councillors. Well, if there's nothing further, I'll put that one all in favour. Against carried.
Item 10.2, Mr. Mayor, is a report on the Capital Works program. And you will note at the front there is some commentary, because since we adopted our budget at the July 2020 meeting, we have received additional funding. One from the LRCI program, and you will notice I put that in brackets after it, so everybody knew what the LRCI program was, to the tune of 1.396 million. And there is a proposed expenditure proposal there for that. And then we've also been fortunate enough, which we applied for this one some time ago, which is fixing, there is a fixing country roads and this is fixing local roads, which is a little bit confusing. This one is funded, was originally funded by 500 million by the state government. This one is probably the first time in my lifetime as an engineer that a government has decided to put money to make roads, which is fantastic to see. And on top of that, the federal government have chipped in with another 191 million. Now, this program is a 5-year program as we understand it. It is restricted to rural councils, so there's only 99 of us left, I think, these days, or 100, say, out of 123 in the state. So we did actually apply for about 5 million and we got just under 3 million. So again, the figures that you see here, and we also have to put some of our own funding towards that, which will be offset from our own program. So it's not as if we're going to find additional money, it'll be just maintenance grading that we've got in here will be offset from some of our own. So, which will boost up that things like Councillor Longmire was talking about, it'll give us a chance to get out and do a bit more maintenance grading and that prior to harvest and that type of thing. So.
Excellent. I've got a mover being Councillor Longmire, seconder being Councillor Kennedy. Questions or comments, Councillor Longmire?
Certainly in regard to the new funding, the LRCI program, it identifies it as a local road capital infrastructure grant, but then we go down to see the first set of figures that come to 1.3 million. That doesn't sort of relate to roads if it's under that heading.
As an engineer, I had that debate in Mannix and a few other areas, but when you read the guidelines, it goes into all sorts. It's designed, why they called it that, I'm not 100% sure. That's the name it's been given, but one of its main aims is also to encourage you to use local builders or local people that might paint a building or fix a fence or something to get some employment. Understanding of the funding is to try and give a bit of a boost after COVID to try and get your community going again. So whilst it's called the local roads capital infrastructure, which I said UB, that means it all goes to roads, but there was others that had a different point of view. When you read the guidelines, I'd have to agree with them. It's not, we have got a reasonable amount of roads in there, but we decided also to put some other, and it's designed for works that are not in your current program, that it may be on your back burner off to the, and you'll see things like John Ford Oval, upgrading the watering system, things. And we also, there's a number of accessibility things into halls and things where exit lights need to be installed, handrails need to be installed, disabled accesses need to be upgraded. So we've done some of that type of thing and tried to balance it out a bit over a whole range of things to give the. I understand where you're coming from.
Oh yeah, when I first saw it, I thought, what the, where's it coming from? Because as I mentioned earlier, in where we're going forward, but the fixing local roads round one, how do we allocate the funding where that's going to be spent? Are we able to determine that, or do we have an input as councillors, or do we have input just from the recommendation from the staff?
The fixing local roads is a little bit different. There was a huge amount of work had to go, and you virtually had to identify each little section of road that you wanted to do in the Shire. So there's a database in behind the fixing local roads, which runs into several pages. For pothole patching, we virtually had to go through and get a GPS reading on areas where we were going to do that sort of thing. So there's a huge amount of data in behind that to come up with those figures. So yeah, I'm not sure which program we're talking about, because the local roads one is solely for roads, whereas the LRCI one can be a combination of roads and.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, further too?
Yes.
Under the fixing local roads, that's the one now that I'm quoting in regard to the allocation of the funding or priority on works. How does that happen? Does it come about by our managers touring around and notifying and making a basic plan, or we as councillors at one time used to be able to drive around the bus and have a look at our country roads and our rural roads and have an idea and heads up on which roads that funding should be spent?
Again, the only comment I'd make, a lot of these programs at the moment come out and you've got about 3 weeks to get your program in. or a month at the most. So you've actually got to, and this was one that came out of left field. It wasn't one we were expecting. It's not a normal program that we've normally had. So what we did, yeah, we virtually did what you're saying, but it happens at such short notice usually that you've got to get out, get all the documentation, which 2 or 3 people took, you know, the full time to do that, then get it in, and the priorities are there the way there's 6 categories that you can apply for funding under, so that's why there's 6, and then just got to say which is your top priority, which is your second priority. So, and sometimes these don't even coincide with a council meeting.
Mr Mayor?
Yes, and Councillor Longmire, I think you raised a good point. Even though that this funding is allocated as such now, I think going forward, even in the next month or two, it'd be a great idea to have that trip so that we can get something down on paper for future direction and future funding that's coming in. So we, you know, if there's an opportunity for a councillor to side a road or have a look at works that's been done, and I think it'd be a great thing.
So I think we come across in our role as councillor, you do come across people that want to make a comment, and that's fair enough too, because they're paying their rates.
Yeah.
So on that journey, there's some stuff that I think some of us are able to identify in such a road journey, or even, an opportunity to certainly have an input towards where the priority is in regard to this project spending.
And I think that'd be advantageous to staff as well, a helpful hint.
The only reason we haven't done them in recent times is because of COVID.
COVID, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We can't pack everybody in a bus at the moment, but I don't I encourage that sort of input.
Yeah.
Councillor,
what we're trying to do is get 12 months in front of where we need to be. So,
The design.
but at the moment, I'm doing reseals that we're going to do this year. I said to the boys the other day, as soon as I finish that, I want to know what the reseals are for next year, so we can start working on any preventative work we need to do this year. And things like Sloane's Froglet, if we've got to work around him or something, it gives us time to do something. And if in 3 years' time we're going to do the road out the back of Rand somewhere, that we need to add that into our program so that we've got a forward program we can work towards.
Yeah.
we did do it last year. We did, we went for a trip, Trev's Culvert and that sort of thing.
Yep.
Councillor Whitechurch.
Mr Mayor, through you to Director Carmichael, like Councillor Longmire said, the fixing local roads was, from what I can understand, just an out of the blue grant that we didn't budget for, we didn't see coming, and I guess we didn't have a scope of works for in that sense. Would I be unreasonable to think that our road maintenance, and I just sealed roads because we've been unsealed roads we've been talking about, we would have a scope of works for that in the budget and what we were going to do and where we're going to go. So now we're looking for $500,000 worth of unsealed roads to be repaired. Given that we looked at the report a few months ago at council where our graders were used for something like 16% of the time, is it logical, or am I thinking along the long lines, to just lease that out, just tender that out as a contract to 500,000 and say, well, okay, here's $500,000 worth of grading that we want you to do, because our graders are obviously tied up. Our graders are committed for the year.
There's a couple of ideas. I mean, you go down to Moira Shire, they run their graders 7 days a week. They use 2 crews.
Yeah, and I know that you've successfully implemented multitasking with our staff, so our grader driver's not just sitting there with his feet on the wheel.
With the lead up to harvest, we're talking about maybe it's worth us thinking about that. We just run 2 crews on a grader and keep them working.
Well, even if our guys are tied up with our budget of work, which I assume we aren't sitting there waiting for another $500,000 worth of work to come in, so they're committed, I would have thought. We then go.
Yeah, if we get to the stage we can't handle it, we've done that in the past. Last year at one stage we had 8 graders on, I think. We only owned 5. So we were leasing or hiring.
But generally, Councillor Longmire, sorry, did you?
Sorry, thank you for the identifying of my questions.
And I, just in summary, I think generally the roads, we've done very well, you know, like as that report came in this morning, but I've heard several. There's obviously areas that would be nice to be graded, but I'd certainly have to applaud the staff on what they've done, and particularly Federation Way is just absolutely amazing.
Just make a comment if I can. Really good report that Steve put through, and finance have done a lot of work in it as well. And we can get a bit blasé, which is a bit funny these days about receiving new money, but this is really significant. And I take the points about councillors wanting to get more ahead of the game in terms of the road priorities. And I think, if, as Steve mentioned, if this local road is going to keep going, and with our asset management planning improving around our roads especially, yeah, Steve and the team be all for it if we can get a way of getting around without being in the one bus. Through next year's budget, and knowing that it's just hard when the government never tell you whether you're going to get 2 million or 5.
Yeah.
True.
But terrific amount of work getting into that. Because I remember when Justin Clancy rang to say that that fixing local roads has come in, and there's an enormous amount of money to go into fixing up all the old outdated signs and faded kilometre marks. And so the staff obviously got a good handle on what those old, I know that doesn't help harvest trucks get along, but you've also got to have a pretty good, you want to have a pretty good update of all your signage and that. So it's pretty specific. Hence the recommendation also about thanking those governments, so federal government and state.
Yes.
And those earlier projects on the first page, like the, there's some good road projects in there, intersection upgrades and things at Howlong, Marwala, and things that Steve and I can vouch we really wanted all that money to go to roads because that's what good engineers want to do. But there's some really key compliance risk projects, whether it's a Cora Memorial Hall, the footy ground at Cora here with the fence, needs a replace. So some really good projects that sort of weren't dreamt up. They were coming out of our asset inspections and community priorities that didn't make drought funded projects, or they didn't make some other way of getting funding. So I think it's a terrific injection by the government, especially. Hence, we're going to thank our recommend and we thank our members.
I'll wait for morning tea.
And there is some good points coming through finance that we do resolve to increase those budgets by everything else.
Thank you.
Well done.
Can I ask,
Yes, councillor.
Mr Carmichael, some months ago, I think you made a comment, it might have even been the last meeting, about heavy farm machinery damaging dirt roads. I think you mentioned ruts that are up to 6 inches deep in them. Is there, I know when you go further north, there are signs warning of penalties for damaging dirt roads or travelling on them in the wet. Is that something we can introduce here?
Yeah, you can. I don't particularly like that approach. I think it's more an education thing. If people have only got to keep off it for a day or an extra 2 days or something, and they don't do the damage. But some people just. I remember when I lived in the western area of the state, people would come to town to tell you it rained, and you said, yeah, it rained here in town as well. But by doing that, they'd driven a 4-wheel drive in the middle of the dirt road, and you had to go out and fill the bloody road in again and regrade it. So it's just an education thing. I think I'd prefer to go that way than. And you've got to be able to enforce it and everything else. It's interesting. I've driven into, because of border restrictions in the last few days, talking about vehicles and things being on roads, driving on the Murray Valley Highway the other side of Wodonga the other day and got passed by a road train. I didn't think I'd ever see the day when I'd see a road train driving into Wodonga, went straight through Wodonga and came up down the freeway and headed off south somewhere. So, and there's a number of road trains that are going up Fedway, up through Urana at the moment, or AB triples or whatever you want to call them.
Definitely be true. Councillor Longmire.
I'm sorry to prolong the discussion, but I think we're on a relevant topic at the moment in regard to what I mentioned at the start of this conversation or debate. But really, in previous times, with the damage to the country roads, what you mentioned, Councillor Longmire, in some instances that happens with contractors that come from interstate and further away where the job's to be done. And so it is a difficult one, Mr Carmichael. You're right. I think your approach is genuine, and you will still get the exception where the contractor in the middle of the night will shift and not aware of the local scene and all the rest of it, and damage is done. So it's a pretty hard one, but it's an awareness that, anyway.
There's one good thing about it, if we're getting that sort of damage, we're having a reasonable season normally.
Yeah.
You would hope.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was a very good topic. So if there's nothing further, I'll put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against carried.
I presume that was all the recommendations.
All at once, yeah.
Righto, 10.3 is the report to Tony's prepared on his beloved organics. Basically, in summary, it's to go through an EOI process to see if we can find some suitable areas that maybe council can consider for the construction of a facility.
Excellent. We need to push on. This is a conversation we had earlier and moved by Councillor Meagle, seconded by Councillor Thomas. Questions or comments, councillors?
Yes, Mr Mayor, if I may.
Thank you, Councillor Meagle.
I think given the discussion earlier in council how important waste is to our ratepayers, this project needs to be supported, and so that we can move forward with a better resolution to allay the fears of the ratepayers that we are trying our best to minimise their cost of waste and as well as councils.
Thank you, Councillor Meagle. At this time, we've got a lot of support from surrounding councils too. So there's a short timeline to go forward with this, hoping that council will be supportive. Any further comments there, councillors? If not, we'll put it. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried.
10.4 is one that the General Manager touched on before, is this regional road transfer. I think Adrian wrote some of this. There's been a fair bit of publicity in the last week or so about this one again. Basically, there's two components to this. You all know that about every 10 years they actually do a review of the road network in New South Wales, and I was fortunate enough to sit on the committee for the last one, which was a different experience, I must say, as a local government engineers rep. But basically, you've got two options with this. You can nominate any of your roads to be upgraded. You could nominate any of your roads to be downgraded, which we don't seem to get a lot of those. But so if you've got a local road you believe should become a regional road, you've got the option to do that under this program. Or if you believe it could go to a state road, and I know there's been talk about Fedway, for instance, bearing in mind that they have set criteria. So a state road, for instance, needs a traffic volume of in excess of 1,000 vehicles a day. The road between here and Urana carries about 500 vehicles a day. So you're about halfway there to ever getting that considered as a state road. So, and you will find the regional areas of Transport New South Wales might nominate some of their state roads, as they did in the last review, to be downgraded to regional roads or even down to local roads. So that's one part of the process that sits over the side, and that's available to councils year round. They only do the review once every 10 years, but you can make application. The other side to this, and the two are getting a little bit confused, I think, is this road transfer where, as Adrian said before, somewhere back before the last election, they decided they were going to take over, say, 15,000 k's. There's only 18,000 k's of regional road in New South Wales. And some of that is in very, very remote areas. And having worked in Burke and Warriner and the outback, there's roads out there that go for hundreds of kilometres that never been gravelled. All they are run a grader on it once every couple of years, and that's it. So they'd be real happy to hand them back probably. And none of their workforce work on them, or very little. The thing we've got to remember is the Fedway, for instance, we've done a hell of a lot of work in the last 3 years going on the Fedway. That's kept their workforce in work during that period. And there is still nothing in any of the stuff I've seen put out to date. And there was another one this morning, I read a lengthy email about it again from the secretary of this particular thing. It doesn't say a thing about how they're going to fund it or what it's going to do. The other interesting thing, they're saying now that it's going to take 7 years to implement, so that's about 2,000 k's a year. First year's already gone. Next year's a state election, and there's no saying that the state government will get re-elected. I would suggest if that happened, that would be the end of this program in any case. And my understanding, they've already got earmarked about 2,000 kilometres that they want to bring across in any case, which you'll find will be coastal stuff. There's a lot of stuff where the freeway's gone from Melbourne to, Melbourne, Sydney to into Brisbane. The old roads are still there, and when we did the last review, everybody was saying, oh, this should still be a state road. Because when there's an accident over there, everybody uses the old road, which is only natural in any case. But when you quiz them about how many accidents, you know, it happened twice a year or something, so you sort of query then, why do we have to maintain that road? And we went on some roads. Remember, we were way up in the north coast somewhere. We went on a road up there one day and they said, this should be a state road. We were the first vehicle on it for the day. And this was at 11 o'clock in the morning or something. The bloke at the local service station wanted to take us in, I think, because he said no one's used that road in the last 20 years. But the council put it up and said this should be a state road because in a case of emergency, it uses a bypass road. We just, there was no substance to their claim, but that's the sort of thing on the coastal belt, and I think that's where you'll find most of this will go. So I would think the best thing that we could do with this is just write a letter to, and back to this committee and say that we've considered the whole thing, but we don't believe that we have any roads that fit the criteria to be reclassified, or we don't believe that there's any should be transferred over to the state. Simply because I think you've got to maintain your workforce out here as well.
Excellent.
It just worries me that we could lose, because no one has sit down and said, if we take these over, this is how we're going to run it to date. So,
Two-part question, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
I might ask you to move it.
Yeah, that's for sure, I would.
Seconded by Councillor Thomas. Councillor Longmire.
Thank you for that. Two-part question, Mr. Carmichael, in regard to the funding allocations from state government and federal government, the adjudication of that allocation funding, is that given by the government or the RMS, or do we make that call? That's the first part of the question. And secondly, when you apply the reasoning for our staff to be able to use that opportunity of funding to keep our workforce in going forward, does that not then take away the opportunity for our local workforce to not be doing other roads other than the priority main roads?
yeah, it does. The first part of the question, the main funding source for regional roads, what they call a block grant. So the block grant for this council, we've got about 250 kilometres of regional road crisscrossing around the area. This year we'll get about 1.85 million for that, and it's in three components. There's a core grant, which is about 1.4. There's a supplementary grant, which I don't know when that came in. It came in some years ago. And there is a traffic facilities grant, which we use for doing line marking and signage and that type of thing, which it doesn't have to be on a regional road. The only other program that is common to every year, nearly every year we get is what we call the repair program. Our current repair program is about 350,000 a year, which we match. We've got to match that dollar for dollar. So councils many years ago persuaded the government to let them match that out of the block grant. So if that 1.85, you automatically lose 350,000 to go across and match that. So we get about a bit over $2 million for each year. My understanding is if we hand these over, we'd lose that money.
Okay.
Unless we were then given a contract in some form to manage it for, but there's no guarantee that you get that contract.
Okay.
And I've seen nothing written anywhere that that's actually what they're proposing to do. So that's the bit that really worries me about it.
Yeah.
Because they haven't set down how the hell, there's already a 400 million backlog in state roads that they've got at the moment. Why are they taking on another 15,000 kilometres of road? And most of that, as you would all know, is substandard to any state highway. And then try and bring it up to a reasonable standard. I just can't see the logic behind what they're trying to do. And I think something would have to give. If we gave them the road that goes from Miranda towards Collyambly and said, this is yours, I'm sure I know where it'd end up. It'd end up in the absolute bottom of the pile and would never get any funding. We don't give it any funding. So if we're not doing it as a local organisation, how the hell is the state government department can even know where Miranda or Collyambly is? So, yeah, I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. In allocate, yeah. And certainly the second part of the question. So I guess, yeah, whilst we're doing this other main road work with our crew, are we falling behind, or do we cover that anyway with the roads that are around the areas like Burridge and Rennie and Rand and all the other.
We lost that $2 million you'd definitely get rid of one grader, I think, to start with, and one crew would have to go. So you just couldn't maintain 5 graders. We're even talking about that at the moment with the funding we're getting. That maybe down the track you've got to look at your crews, and like I said, more with their double shifting, maybe that's an option where you have the same amount of gear, but you don't need so much gear. You're still keeping the same workforce going, but you double shift them. So
So you're going to lose ability as well as opportunity of funding on those lesser roads. More funding will come in.
But if they'd come out and said, we're going to manage these roads under XYZ contract arrangements, you could make an informed judgment. But at the moment, I just believe with this, it's just hand them to us. And one of the committee men said to me the other day, you could write it off your books there. It's not on your books anymore. And I said, well, yeah, so what's that mean? Depreciation comes down by a few $100s or something, it doesn't.
I think that's the point, Steve, and through the mayor that I heard, I think it was Melinda Pavey, she was roads minister before the election, and now she's water. But she was on ABC 675 spruiking about how positive it was going to be, and poor councils can't really maintain all these roads. We'll take them all back and you won't have your depreciation. But yeah, the devil was probably in the detail. We've never got it. So councils like Hay and that, especially in our Ramjo, are really worried about the unknowns. But I could take your point, because on face value, you go, that'd be really good. We haven't got the depreciation. We'll get the work still. We'll get new funding. And we can get even more graders and go into all these local roads. But as Steve and that have been around a while know, that it's never going to be as good as it sounds. And if we just let that first year or two go through and see what eventuates, and yeah, if it was a win-win, you'd jump at it. But we're just
even if we write that letter this year, it's not saying next year we can't just say yes. Now that we've seen how it operates, we'll join in again. But yeah, I just think for this year we just.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question.
You're welcome. I think if there's nothing more, councillors, I'll put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried.
Do you want to include that in the?
we're going to see if we could put in there that or even a new recommendation to lodge a submission.
Yeah, put a submission in the.
So another point. Another point to the recommendation.
Yeah, we put in a recommendation.
Mover and seconder, happy with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, so there'll be a point going under the recommendation.
Lodge a submission to the road reclassification panel. Yeah.
The road transfer panel.
Road transfer panel.
Well, yeah, it's both, I suppose.
Excellent, all in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried.
10.5, Mr Mayor, is a lead-up report to tender 2138 for the construction of the concrete work related to the culvert at Daysdale. It's a recommendation there that we move into closed committee.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Wiles, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. And thank you very much, Mr Carmichael. That concludes that report.
Good morning to you, is out there beside my desk.
Yeah, would someone like to move to?
Or do you want to close these couple out and then?
Yeah, we can do that fairly quickly. Okay. Yeah, all right. Item number 11, notice of motion, question without notice, there'll be no items. 12, reports from committees, no items. 13, reports from delegates. Verbal reports from delegates. Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, I just do have a couple. That was really great to hear about the Sloane's Froglet, because I'm actually the council representative for our Sloane's Froglet. So there you go. It was first discovered at Tokemall.
More great.
There you go.
Wind blowing, west wind.
Yeah.
One great leap for mankind.
And it is a tiny little bloke, like he's only quite small, but he makes a very loud noise. Anyway, I had the opportunity to attend a Cairo District Land Care group evening with some really great experts in the room. Well, I weren't in the room because we were out at Whitehead Street Wetlands. I'm sure it only was yesterday that we started those plantings out there, land care. But I think it was probably nearly 10 years ago we started those plantings out there. And I just want to congratulate all those people who have helped maintain and enhance that particular precinct, because it has become a really beautiful flora and fauna place for our community to visit and learn. And that's what we did the other night. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, the numbers were restricted to 20, but those 20 people were really engaged and we got to identify lots of frogs. Now, my fellow councillor Longmire was asking, how do I identify frogs? We can actually get an app on your phone, and it's called Frog ID. So you go out to your back swamp, wherever you'd like to be. You can go in town, wherever there might be a little wetland, and you press record for a minute, and then you press submit, and they'll email back with what frogs.
Excellent.
As easy as that.
We'll have to get that app loaded on Councillor Longmire's phone today.
If you'd like to take up the challenge, I'm prepared to set it.
Do the frogs talk to Android phones as well?
I'm sure they do.
Okay.
If you can download an app, so that's that one. That was a really great night. And I'd just like to mention that Landcare staff did mention council and their ongoing support, and thank them very much for that project. So.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas.
I was able to come over also and had an invitation to the Aramanth Foundation, which is our lovely Julianne White and co, to a meeting to discuss NDIS funding and opportunities for those clients to look at getting our, I'm going to use the word disabled, but that population of our community into the workforce locally. Unfortunately, the only opportunities for that particular sector to go to work is remotely, and they have to either get on a bus or private transport to get there, and that is in Wodonga or Wangaratta. And we have got opportunity now through some funding and some really key stakeholders, and those stakeholders are growing from our meeting the other day, to actually look at getting those community members here working within our own council area, which is really exciting. So we've gone away from that meeting, and I do believe Councillor Whitechurch was invited to that meeting. You might have been yourself too, Mr. Mayor, and I did also invite Councillor Longley in on the conversation, because I think it's important, because he's delegate on our disability committee. Full support of council, because we had 2 council officers in the room, plus really other good stakeholders, that we actually support them scoping this project out further. So let's endorse that. If we can endorse that at some stage, that would be brilliant. I don't know how we would do that. General Manager, that we could do that at some stage, but certainly if you could speak to Jared, he might have some ideas on how we can do that. Can I get some in-principle support for them?
Suggest a recommendation for
Yes.
October,
Good.
council?
Yeah.
Yep.
That would be great. Would you be in great at that, Councillor Hodgins? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, and just 2 others. I was able to also do a Zoom meeting for New South Wales Southwest Zone libraries. As we know, our libraries are playing an important role. And just to highlight a really couple of key fast facts, thanks to COVID-19, but I'm sure it will only continue, that people have discovered our libraries and our library services. And there has been a 200% increase in ebook downloads, a 300% increase in e-loans, so people logging on and getting their books sent to them, and 100% increase in website access to our libraries right across the southwest, which is just amazing. But the other important thing, we even think about our own local libraries, and I'm sure you might have had feedback, Councillor Longley, with your local library, because you've got to remember both Howlong and Mulwala are both not only our libraries, but they're also our service centres. With people coming in to get our border permits, all of a sudden you've got people coming through the door who have discovered the library because they've had to come in and use the computers to get their border permit. What a win for our libraries.
Cool.
So that's really exciting. And as also you'd be aware that myself, Councillor Longmire, our Mayor and our General Manager are presently sitting in on the Murray-Darling Association conference. So that started yesterday, so it's 2.5 days. So it was yesterday, today and tomorrow. As you would know, we're moving forward and we're going to be supporting some recommendations that we moved on our business papers at the AGM tomorrow. So we look forward to doing that and talking to those. And the other point of call is that our aim is to get Sir Angus Houston to Urunna. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. That was very good.
Can I just make add a point to Councillor Thomas's report there, re the libraries? I'm getting really favourable feedback from our employee Tanya at the Howlong Library. She's picking up and dropping off books after hours to people that can't get there at her own bat. I've actually had really positive phone calls. It's absolutely, she's doing a mighty job, and I think that council need to acknowledge that.
You're good. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Longmire.
Okay, you go. Just a report, if I may, Mr. Mayor, in regard to attending the Rand Bowling Club AGM, and they were grateful for the opportunity through the drought funding to be able to upgrade their facilities out there with the roof and other projects they had on board. And so the thanks comes back from that club to council in that opportunity. Their finances are satisfactory, although that strength is from reserves that have been held over the journey for a long time. So it's, cash flow is still a challenge for them, and so they, obviously for the numbers that have lessened in their club on the journey, but at the moment they have got satisfactory membership of that little club. So that was that report, and obviously about the first day of the MDA yesterday, which we attended, and certainly it was quite interesting, the comment from the chairman of the MDA, Councillor David Thurley, in regard to the grassroots input as to go forward much more in the MDBA planning. And so that was endorsed by other speakers or presenters that were there yesterday. And perhaps my comment in regard to the new chairman of the MDBA, Sir Angus Horton, is a chap that I believe will gather a lot of confidence in going forward to come to a result. There's 4 years left before the adoption of the MDBA process. So within that 4 years, I think that this is going to be led by a very strong and no fuss chairman.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Just a comment on the clubs. So it was interesting on the ABC this morning. There was debate on clubs. It was sparked a few days ago by the RSL club, the commercial club in Wagga closing. I'm not sure about the RSL club, but they're in fair bit of financial stress at the moment as well. So it's great to hear when you see some of these smaller clubs. The CEO from Clubs New South Wales gave a report and said it was going to be ongoing, like his vision of the future. The clubs have got to merge, they've got to renew themselves and upgrade. But when you hear small clubs like Rand still functioning, still making it happen, I know only at home it's been very successful as well to keep it maintained itself. So yeah, they're good news stories in a tough environment for the bigger clubs for sure. Okay, so now if there's no more, sorry, Councillor Whitechurch.
No, that's fine, Mr. Mayor. I was just coming off what Councillor Longmire said about Rand. I think it should be noted that our local architects up the road here, Regional Design, have just won a national award for their planned Rand concept. That would have been certainly talked about at that AGM or in the likes of the tea and coffee room, whereby they've really got embraced with Rand committee, and they've put together a plan Rand to put Rand on the map. And of course, one of the directors of the company has a local presence there. So I think his grandmother or something may have been part of Rand. So it's great to see that they've put a lot of their time and effort into that, and the rewards have come with the acknowledgement in the national award. So well done to that. The other thing was the lock meeting. We've spoke as council about getting behind the opportunity to put a lock into Corowa. Since attended a couple of meetings, virtual meeting with the MDA, and then as well as a couple of meetings with the Chamber of Commerce and other stakeholders. And whilst it's a big and probably in some people's eyes an optimistic task, there hasn't been a knockback in any one area as yet. It's all been positive, and it's all been suggested to move forward and progress forward. So as far as that goes now, the Chamber of Commerce, in conjunction with, I guess, the council and other stakeholders, are submitting to the relevant departments their pledge to have this investigated further. So it's progressing along behind the scenes with some big drives from the local community. So we'll keep everyone informed of that as it comes to light. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Whitechurch. Councillor Longmire?
Thank you for that. I think in this opportunity, or the outlook and vision that's proposed or being discussed for the lock, probably the key stakeholders are the landowners. And I guess in that regard, we can have vision and support and enthusiasm from a lot of bodies and parties, but at the end of the day, there'll be a bottom line with the people that will be affected by submerging their country. I think that's something that has got to go to another sector.
And if I can on that, that was discussed at, may have been the MDA online meeting, Councillor Longmire, whereby obviously there still hasn't been any heights done or any talk about where the lock would go. I mean, obviously we don't know the fall from Corowa downstream. We don't know what the backup of water will take effect from where you put the lock, if it was going to go into, how far back up would be benefited. No point putting the lock somewhere down near Jillamatong and finding out that the water doesn't even back up at Corowa, and to back it up at Corowa you'd need to be putting all of Kuanadji and all of those properties underwater. So exactly what you say is right, but we don't have to make that judgment or decision. There'll be people that know exactly where the water height needs to back up from, and obviously there's some of the things that will come up if it was to progress further. So dead right.
Excellent. Any further? If there's no further verbal reports, would someone like to move those, please? Moved by Councillor Longmire, seconded by Councillor Thomas. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, we'll move on to correspondence requiring council action for information. 14.1 Wagga Wagga City Council. Email dated on 21st of August requesting council support the emergency allocation of water in the Southern Basin. A copy of the email template was included in the agenda, and that was in relation to emergency water for food and fodder. So anyone that didn't have, if the opportunity was never there to produce food and fodder, have some emergency water up their sleeve. So there is a recommendation there that council support the request from Wagga. Would someone like to move that, please? Moved by Councillor Longley, seconded by Councillor Thomas. Any questions or comments, councillors? If not, I'll put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried. 14.2 was Slattery and Johnson. There was an email dated on the 5th of August advising council about the Northern New South Wales floodplain harvesting and on-farm water storage information project. A copy of this email and project proposal is including with the agenda. Any comments, councillors? Councillor Longmire.
Yeah, if I may, yesterday it was said at the MDA conference about, I think it was Fiona Simpson that made the comment in regard to the inadequate legislation currently that is controlling that opportunity for water harvesting, but the future outlook somewhere by the government is going to propose changes. Have I got that right?
Yeah, I actually think this change is already being brought to the table. They were talking about 1,000 megalitres as in the capacity of any form of that had to then be registered, anything above. I mean, we can get some clarification around that, but that's just about the harvesting and those harvestable water rights.
Yep.
But I mean, it's certainly the flow-on effect, pardon the pun, even to the south. We've got to remember that our landscapes are changing and how they're looking and how people are capturing water. Let's bring it to the table. Maybe there is opportunity for us to explore. I don't know how we become part of that conversation as well. But yeah, certainly looking at this, it's a topic that needs to be explored further.
My word.
Can I ask the GM to comment?
Oh, yeah, and there's all three. So Councillor Thomas, Longmire and the Mayor and myself at the yesterday's day one of the conference. It was raised by numerous speakers, whether they be scientists or government or whoever, about the Darling doesn't give anything to the Murray anymore, if much at all. So, and then the Murray's under a lot of pressure to get the water through to Sunraysia and down to South Australia. So certainly, I think, and the push from these southern irrigators and others, I don't think it'll be left unturned now to try and get a better situation on that. Yeah.
I think, if I may, Mr. Mayor, in regard to this, is going, a lot of these variables are going to bring it to a head. You can sense that in what we've learned only after one day. We've got this afternoon and also tomorrow. And so I think it's a genuine outlook to try and solve something that's been muddled around and a lot of money spent over what was 2012 when Minister Burke announced the opportunity for the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, which I attended at Canberra. And so that's 8 years it's taken to get to what we've got at the moment. So really, there's 4 years left, but I once again support the chairperson and the endeavour by lots of groups, including us as a council participating in the MDA, to have an input and really push for some resolution that's really good.
And in some ways, it feels like we've just got out of the blocks.
Yes.
But I suppose the highlight is that local government, LGA, were actually really highlighted as the heroes yesterday as being the representatives for our on-ground and the advocating that we are doing on behalf of our communities, especially in the water space.
Yes.
Michael McCormack did highlight that yesterday.
I think I was in conversation with myself and the general manager on the way home. One of the words of the day was consultation.
Consultation.
It came up with most speakers as their way through the problem. Okay, so I'll go to 14.3, just run through them. The Honourable Mark Colton MP, thanking Council for correspondence regarding COVID-19 impact, and that copy of the letters included. 14.4, the Murray-Darling Association, MDA Delegates Report, August 2020 for tabling at Council. That's also included. Councillors, if anyone would like to comment on the way through, you're welcome. 14.5, New South Wales State Emergency Operations Centre. Now that was a letter dated in September. Police Force Deputy Commissioner regarding the up and coming summer season and management of beaches another summer recreational attraction governed by local council, and a copy of the letters included. So the recommendations to the correspondence items 14.2 to 14.4 as tabled in September 2020 business paper be noted. Did I get a mover and seconder? Those,
Haven't got it yet, no.
I haven't. So moved by councillor Wales, seconded by councillor Longley. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Do we move into confidential or suspend?
Probably I would suspend for morning tea.
Yeah, would someone like to move that? Councillor Longley, seconded by
After
councillor
that, go
Longley.
straight into close.
All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Would someone like to move us back into resume standing orders, please? Moved by councillor Thomas, seconded by councillor Longmire. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Would someone like to move us into closed council, please? Moved by councillor Longley, seconded by councillor Thomas. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Okay, councillors, resolved
Just do the.
in the closed council session, the 9.6 tender 2020-136, provision of labour hire services, lifeguard and associated services for Coro and Howlong swimming pools.
Rochelle's got it, or we can read it here.
Resolved on the motion of councillors Longley and Longmire, number one, that council accept the tender from the Monumentum One Shared Services Proprietary Limited, 14 O'Donnell Avenue, Myrtleford, Victoria, 3737 for contract number 2136 for the provision of labour hire services for lifeguard and associated services for Coro and Howlong swimming pools for the amount listed in the table schedule 2021 sports and aquatic facilities provider in their tender documentation, and point two, that council authorises the general manager to sign the contract on its behalf with a successful tenderer. 10.5, tender conduct report, contract number 2020-138, Daysdale Culvert. It was resolved on the motions of councillor Thomas and Longley. Number one, the council accepts a tender from Norbrow Curb Proprietary Limited for the contract number 2020-138 Daysdale Culvert for the lump sum amount of 399,186, including GST. And point two, the council authorises the general manager to sign a contract on its behalf with a successful tenderer. Thank you. I would, before concluding the meeting, I'd call on councillor Wales. Councillor Wales, would you like to make a comment before conclusion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know it's not the norm, but during last week, my brother-in-law, Terence Brain, passed away. Now, I know he's not a councillor, but Terry used to go to get the paper with his dog in the morning. He'd always go down past the foreshore, down past the Scout Hall. He'd always pick up rubbish on the foreshore there, put in the bin. In the end, he ended up taking a bag down there and collecting rubbish like that. So, and he always sees saying to me, there must have been a bit of a party down there last night. It's all the rubbish left on the foreshore. But I'd just like to acknowledge, let the council be aware that Terry was not employed, but by doing that rubbish, it's just a normal, generous thing, and for the council knows. So, thank you, Terry, what you've done for us all, our council.
Yeah, and thank you, councillor Wales, for remembering one of our respectable citizens. It makes a big difference when you get someone like that has input into the community and the surrounds, respects the surrounds and all the work that goes into them. So we'd like to also, as a council, remember Terry and his family and express our sympathy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillors and staff. That concludes our meeting. Very good.